Imagine you're standing beside a crackling campfire nearly 40,000 years ago. Darkness has swallowed the forest, and every sound beyond the firelight could mean danger. Suddenly, footsteps echo through the trees. A lone figure begins walking toward your camp. No one speaks, hands tighten around sharpened spears. Children are pulled closer. The stranger hasn't attacked. He hasn't even reached the camp. Yet everyone is already making a decision. Friend or enemy? Family or outsider? Think about that for a second. There were no passports, no surnames, no written records, and certainly no family photos. Entire human groups wandered across vast landscapes, sometimes traveling hundreds of miles over generations. So how could anyone know whether the person approaching the fire shared their blood or posed a deadly threat? At first, the answer seems obvious. Maybe they simply recognized each other's faces. But that explanation begins to fall apart the moment you look closer. Faces change. Children grow into adults. People age. Injuries reshape appearances, and strangers can look surprisingly familiar. So what happened when recognizing a relative meant the difference between survival and extinction? The deeper researchers dug into this mystery, the stranger it became. Hidden inside ancient bones, modern DNA, and even the way people unconsciously react to one another today were clues pointing toward an invisible survival system, so powerful that it quietly influenced who humans trusted, who they protected, who they feared, and even who they chose to love. The real mystery isn't whether ancient humans recognized their relatives. It's how they knew before anyone said a single word. The simplest explanation is also the one most people would guess first. Ancient humans recognized their relatives the same way we often do today, by their faces. Picture a small hunting band living together for years. Every morning began with the same familiar faces gathered around a fire. Every hunt, every meal, every celebration, and every loss was shared with the same handful of people. Children watched their parents grow older. Brothers and sisters grew taller together. Grandparents carried the stories of generations. In groups that were often no larger than 30 or 40 individuals, everyone knew everyone else. That idea isn't just common sense. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer communities have found that these small groups spend enormous amounts of time together, making facial recognition remarkably reliable. Human brains are also exceptionally good at remembering faces, especially those we see repeatedly. It's one of our greatest social strengths at first glance that seems to solve this mystery. If you spent your entire life with the same people, why wouldn't you instantly recognize your own relatives? But imagine something different. A successful hunt brings visitors from another nearby band. A family splits apart during migration and reunites years later. A child grows into an adult after a decade apart. Smoke, scars, illness, aging, and harsh weather can dramatically change a person's appearance. Suddenly, a familiar face isn't so easy to recognize anymore. And then there's an even stranger problem. What if someone who wasn't related to you looked almost exactly like someone who was? That question began to trouble scientists because survival couldn't depend on something as unreliable as appearance alone. If one mistake meant trusting the wrong person or rejecting your own kin, nature would have demanded something far more sophisticated. The face was only the first clue. The real system was still hidden. If faces weren't enough, then maybe ancient humans relied on something even simpler, their voices. It's an idea that feels almost obvious. Even today, many of us can recognize a close friend or family member before we ever see them. A single laugh across a crowded room, a familiar way of calling your name, or the rhythm of someone's footsteps can instantly reveal who they are. So perhaps prehistoric humans did exactly the same. For a while, that seemed like a satisfying answer. Then researchers began looking at how early human groups actually lived, and an unexpected problem emerged. Imagine two hunting bands meeting after several seasons apart. Children had grown into adults. Voices had deepened. Some people had survived injuries that permanently altered the way they spoke. Others had spent years with neighboring groups, picking up different accents and habits. Even today, accents can change surprisingly quickly. A familiar voice isn't always as permanent as we imagine. That should have solved one mystery. Instead, it created a bigger one, because ancient humans didn't just need to recognize individuals. They needed to answer a far more important question almost instantly. Can this person be trusted? Recognizing someone wasn't enough if they had switched groups, formed new alliances, or arrived with strangers. Survival depended on judging not only identity, but belonging. Was this person truly one of us, or only pretending to be? Modern psychology offers a fascinating clue. People often make unconscious judgments about others within seconds, long long before a meaningful conversation begins. We notice tiny details we don't even realize we're noticing. A glance, a posture, a scent, a movement. Our brains quietly assemble hundreds of signals into a single feeling, safe or suspicious. Pretty strange, right? If our minds still do this today, perhaps ancient humans weren't relying on one clue at all. Perhaps they were reading an invisible combination of signals that worked together like pieces of a puzzle. But if that's true, what was the one signal that could never be faked? That question led researchers in an unexpected direction. Instead of digging only through ancient campsites and fossilized bones, some scientists began investigating something far more personal: the human sense of smell. At first, it sounded almost too strange to take seriously. Could our noses really reveal something our eyes and ears sometimes could not? To find out, researchers designed a series of unusual experiments. Volunteers were asked to wear plain cotton shirts for several nights without using perfume, scented soap, or deodorant. The shirts were then sealed away and later smelled by complete strangers. The goal wasn't to see whose scent was more pleasant. It was to discover whether people unconsciously reacted differently to certain body odors. Most expected the results to be random. They weren't. Again and again, participants showed subtle but consistent preferences. Without realizing why, they often responded differently to scents linked to people whose immune system genes, especially those in the major histocompatibility complex, or MHC, were either more similar or more different from their own, depending on the context. The human brain appeared to be picking up biological information hidden inside ordinary body odor, information that no one could consciously see or describe. Think about that for a second. Long before DNA testing existed, the human body may have been quietly broadcasting clues about identity and biological relatedness. That discovery transformed an old mystery. Perhaps ancient humans weren't simply recognizing faces or voices. Perhaps every close encounter carried an invisible biological signature, helping them judge familiarity in ways they never consciously understood. But the evidence raised an even bigger question. If scent could reveal hidden information between two people standing face to face, how did ancient humans recognize relatives who had been separated for years, or those standing on the opposite side of a crowded gathering, far beyond the reach of smell? The trail hadn't ended. It had just become far more intriguing. More than half a century ago, a young anthropologist named Napoleon Chagnon stepped into the dense Amazon rainforest to live among the Yanomami, one of the world's most isolated indigenous societies. He expected to document how people hunted, traded, and survived in a place that had changed little over thousands of years. Instead, he stumbled into a mystery that no textbook had prepared him for. When strangers approached a Yanomami village, no one rushed forward with open arms. The entire community became alert. Hunters quietly reached for their weapons. Elders watched in silence. Children stayed close to their families. It wasn't panic, it was caution, practiced over countless generations. But then something remarkable happened. A visitor would speak, not a long conversation. Sometimes only a few familiar names, the name of a distant ancestor, or the memory of a shared relative. Almost instantly, the tension could dissolve. Faces softened, weapons lowered, food was offered. A potential enemy became a welcomed guest. Think about that for a second. Those words weren't valuable because they proved someone's identity on paper. There was no paper. They mattered because they unlocked a web of relationships that everyone understood. A single remembered connection could reveal who had hunted together, who had married into another group, or who shared grandparents many years before. For Chagnon, it was a powerful reminder that family wasn't remembered through photographs or official records. It lived inside stories carried from one generation to the next, yet even that beautiful system had limits. What happened if both people were too young to remember those stories? What if an entire family line had disappeared? Or what if someone deliberately lied about their ancestors? Once again, the mystery refused to stay solved. Perhaps memory was only one piece of a much older survival system, one that reached far beyond names alone. By now, the mystery had grown far beyond ancient humans. The more researchers compared different species, cultures, and civilizations, the more they noticed the same invisible pattern appearing again and again. It was as if nature had been solving the same problem for millions of years. How do you recognize your own? Take elephants, for example. A calf separated from its family can often recognize relatives years later, not by sight alone, but through low-frequency calls and scent. Wolves identify members of their pack through a combination of smell, vocalizations, and familiar behavior. Even penguins, standing among thousands of nearly identical birds, somehow find their own mate and chick using unique calls. Think about that. Across completely different species, evolution rarely trusted a single clue. It built systems with layers of evidence. Then the same pattern appeared in human history. Whether it was Aboriginal Australians crossing vast deserts, Arctic Inuit surviving frozen coastlines, or hunter-gatherers on the African savanna, communities developed subtle ways of identifying who belonged. A person's accent, the stories they knew, the ornaments they wore, the scars on their body, the way they greeted others, even the rhythm of their movements, became silent signals of identity. None of these clues worked perfectly on their own, but together they formed something remarkably reliable, and history shows why that mattered. Groups that could quickly distinguish trusted allies from dangerous outsiders were often better at sharing food, protecting children, defending territory, and surviving harsh environments. The ability to recognize us wasn't just a social skill, it became an evolutionary advantage. But here's where things become even more fascinating. If elephants, wolves, penguins, and humans all evolved layered recognition systems independently, perhaps they weren't solving different problems at all. Perhaps they were all responding to the same ancient pressure. So the real question was no longer how ancient humans recognized relatives. It was why evolution invested so much in making that ability almost impossible to lose. But evolution is rarely perfect. If ancient humans had developed such an effective system for recognizing relatives, you might expect to work every time. It didn't. And those rare failures may have shaped human history just as much as its successes. Consider one of the most surprising discoveries in archaeology. DNA extracted from prehistoric burial sites has revealed individuals who spent their entire lives living among people who were not their closest biological relatives. Some were women who had joined distant communities after marriage. Others appear to have been adopted, orphaned, or welcomed into groups through alliances rather than blood. They weren't born into the tribe that eventually buried them with honor. Think about what that means. These people were accepted as family without actually sharing close genetic ties. Then there are even stranger cases from the natural world. Some bird species unknowingly raise chicks that were laid in their nests by another bird. Certain mammals adopt abandoned young that aren't genetically related at all. At first glance, these behaviors seem to break the rules of evolution, but they don't. In harsh environments, cooperation could sometimes be more valuable than strict bloodlines. A skilled hunter, a knowledgeable healer, or an experienced tracker might contribute more to a group's survival than a distant cousin ever could. Trust wasn't built on genetics alone. It could also be earned through shared risks, loyalty, and years of living side by side. That changes the picture completely. Ancient humans weren't simply asking, "Are you related to me?" Sometimes the more important question was, "Can I trust you with my life?" And that distinction points toward the deepest answer of all, that connects biology, culture, memory, and survival into a single invisible system. By now, the pieces of the puzzle begin to fit together. Ancient humans were never relying on a single way to recognize their relatives. Not faces, not voices, not smell, not stories. They were using all of them at once. Imagine standing at the edge of a camp 30,000 years ago as someone approaches from the trees. Before a single word is spoken, your brain has already begun collecting evidence. Their face looks familiar. Their walk resembles someone you've known since childhood. Their scent carries subtle biological signals. Their voice confirms a memory. They know the names of people in your band. They follow the same customs, the same gestures, the same unwritten rules. None of those clues proves their family, but together, they create something astonishing, a probability. That's the hidden story. Evolution didn't build humans to answer, "Is this definitely my relative?" Instead, it built a brain that constantly estimates, "How likely is this person to be one of us?" That single ability transformed our species. It helped parents protect their children. It encouraged brothers and sisters to cooperate instead of compete. It made food sharing possible during famine. It strengthened alliances between families. It reduced deadly conflicts inside small communities while making cooperation rewarding enough for entire tribes to survive. And here's the remarkable part, that ancient survival system never disappeared. Even today, your brain quietly notices familiar faces, recognizable accents, shared traditions, family resemblances, body language, and countless tiny details before you're consciously aware of them. Most of the time, you never realize it's happening. Millions of years of evolution are working silently beneath every first impression. So the answer to our original question isn't that ancient humans had some magical way of identifying their relatives. Their true advantage was something far more extraordinary. They evolved an invisible network of biological instincts, memory, culture, and learned experience that worked together like a living detective, constantly gathering clues, weighing evidence, and making life or death decisions in a world where one mistake could mean losing everything. And perhaps that's why, even in our modern world, the oldest part of the human mind is still searching for the same thing it searched for around those ancient campfires. Who is one of us? Now return to that ancient campfire. The forest is still wrapped in darkness. The footsteps are growing louder. A lone figure emerges from the shadows, carrying no written proof of who they are. No name tag, no family record, no document that says, "You can trust me." And yet, within moments, a decision is made. Not because of a single face, not because of a single voice, but because thousands of tiny clues come together inside a brain shaped by countless generations of survival. Picture the firelight reflecting in the eyes of the people gathered around the camp. What kept them alive wasn't just stronger weapons or sharper intelligence. It was their extraordinary ability to read one another, to sense belonging, remember relationships, and build trust in a world where every stranger could change the future of the tribe. Think about that for a second. Civilization didn't begin with cities, kingdoms, or written laws. It began the moment humans became skilled enough to recognize who they could stand beside when everything was at risk. And perhaps that's the most remarkable part of this story. Long before we built roads, nations, or family trees on paper, we carried one inside our minds, an invisible map of connection, shaped by evolution and refined by experience, because in the end, the greatest survival tool ancient humans ever possessed wasn't a spear or a fire. It was the ability to recognize that no human survives alone.